Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we'll Masech the Zevachim Daf Chaf Beis. We are going to begin on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, about 5 lines from the bottom with the word Gufa. Getting back to what we said before. Rav Yossi Rabbi Chanina, Kol Kir She'ein Bo Kedei L'Kadish Arba Kohanim Mimenu Ein Makdishin Boy. It's necessary that there has to be enough water in this kior, which, as we've been mentioning and talking about the past couple of days, is the laver, which is used in order for the Kohanim to wash their hands and their feet. It has to have the minimum shear of 4. Shinem Arachsu Mimenu Moshe Aaron Ubanov. So you have Moshe and his children and Aharon, which is 4. So therefore it has to at least be that minimum measurement. Okay. So on this meisvei, kol keel mekadshin, you can use any kli to sanctify and wash your hands. Bein sheyesh behen revius, whether or not it is able to withhold a revius. Bein she'ein behen revius, even if it's not even able to hold a revius lug of mayim, which obviously is not a large enough shear to be able to have for 4 people. Vavashehi kli sharis. But it has to be at least a kli sharis. But again, this is a kasha. We see clearly you don't need to have 4. So b'ha mimenu amrachmana. But the pasuk says mimenu, from it. So yirchatzu, when it says yirchatzu, is a rabbi's kli sharis. So that's So Omer Rav Ada bar Acha. So actually he gives an answer b'kodeach b'toichai. Says Rashi, what does it mean? There was made a hole in the kli, and the small kli was like attached to the big one. So kadech daifanu shel kior v'toichim b'soichel kli katan. They had the small kli there, mixasai l'chutz, and it was somewhat out. V'yonik mimei hakir. So it was actually getting its water from the kior itself, which the kior is certainly enough to again have to have held 4, as we said, is the minimum. However, as Rashi says, if let's say this kli is not enough for 4, then it cannot be used. Okay, so the Gemara says menu amrachmana, and this is actually going on what we said before that said kol kli sharis is fit l'kadesh, but it says mimenu, it has to be from the kior. So yirchatzu, when it says yirchatzu, so rabos kli sharis, even that. So yahachi kli chayil nami, maybe even a kli chayil. So Rabbi, no kli chayil v'sasamrit. Definitely can't use that. Mekabachaymer, mechanai, mikano. What do we see from the base of the laver? Makanai shenimshach imoi in mekadesh. You can't use the base of the laver, the bottom part, to wash. So kli chol she'enu nimshach imo, it certainly wasn't anointed because it's a kli chol. Eno din she'en mekadesh. So we can learn out from the kanai, again from the base, that you can't use. So certainly you can't use a kli chol. The kanum and how do you know you can't use that? The sanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yochli Hey kanum mekadesh keder shahakir mekadesh. You would think maybe you could in fact wash your hands with the base. So that we made this kior out of copper, and the base was also made out of copper. Which means, why does it say it this way? Is the only way that the kior and the kanoi are similar is in its material, that they were both made out of copper. Nothing else. Therefore, you cannot use this kanoi to wash your hands. So therefore, you also, kavachomer, shouldn't be able to use a kli chol. Armalimar zutra berei derav mari l'ravina, so it says malo kanoi, but when it came to the base, shein asui l'taichai, it's not used for withholding anything inside. So maybe that's the reason why you can't use it. However, let's say a kli chol, which is meant to be used, so maybe you could. So time b'kli chol. So maybe again, it's not a raya that pumfaker. You can maybe say kli chayil has the natural element of a kli that you can put water into it. So elwa mimenu, when it says mimenu in the pasuk, it's muti kli chayil. That pasuk is excluding. Yachi kli sharis nami, so it's excluded kli sharis. No, because Rabbi Rachman Yirchatzu. So Yirchatzu is including the Kli Sharis. So the Gemara asks, Umar Isa, so why do you think that we should include a Kli Sharis and exclude a Kli Chol? Pretty obvious. Because Zeh Tayin Mashiach Kamahu. Zeh Ein Tayin Mashiach Kamahu. So one is anointed and was sanctified, namely the Kli Sharis, and that's why you could use it, as opposed to the Kli Chol, which was not. Question 13. The Indian Madima Hakasuv Kanushal Kir, the fact that it's just supposed to be made out of Nechoshas, copper. And it's not similar. You can't use it for washing hands. So Amarish Lakish Kol Ha Maishlim Kol Mashlim Mikvah. Anything that could be completing in a mikvah, Mashlim Kiyur, also will complete the Kiyur, and we're going to explain what this means in a second. And Rashi quotes, this is a quote from Sechtas Mikvos, that it says, Yesh Malin V'loi Poislin, Ma'alin Umashlimin L'Arboim Sa V'Hasim Afarishahu. So you could actually, somehow, as we'll see, even if, let's say, we don't have the requisite amount of water at a certain point, it could still potentially be good, as we'll explain. However, not L'Revius. When it comes to Netil Shadayim, which requires a Revius Lug, so Enu Mashum. So what does that mean? Limuti Mai. Ilim Limute Tit Hanadoik. If we're talking about liquidy mud, so we're making a distinction between liquidy mud and a mikvah as opposed to for Netil Shadayim, Hechadami. Depara Shaycha V'Shaysim Imanu. If, let's say, we're dealing with a case where you have a cow that bends down and drinks from it, says Rashi Shenu of, therefore it's obviously not very thick, livsul mishtias behema, because it's still something which an animal can drink, then a fil revius dami. Says Rashi, the cholzman shenivsul mishtias behema ben bekli ben mekarka psuin. So halo nivsulu ksherin. So the litmus test doesn't make any difference what it is, if it's for Netil Shadayim, for like a Revius Netil Shadayim, or it's to be a Mashal Mamei Mikvah. It doesn't make any difference. The din is the same, and therefore it shouldn't matter. You should be able to make that distinction between them. So that can't be the case. Okay, so with that said, the ain par shaycha v'shaysim imenu. So let's say it won't drink from it. Afilu mikvah nami ain mashlam. So you can't use it because it's too thick and it's not like a liquid. Elam yute. It's coming to maybe exclude yavchushin, adumin. It's referring to these type of gnats. So yutushin below kinafayim. They don't have wings, says Rashi. Kederach shegadol b'shuli chaviyai shel yayin shalonu b'mechutz. They grow by these barrels of wine in the outside. Now, what is this referring to, these gnats? Afil bi naihu nami. So in that case, even if it's the way, even if it is the way it is, says Rashi, im kol hamikva nas mehen. Even if, let's say, it's all around the mikvah, it's kosher. If this is basically its nature, so then you could be toivel in that, even though there's gnats. Literally, you could be toivel in the eye of a fish. And again, what that's basically saying, so Rashi says, if you have a dag gadol, a huge fish, shenimoy shumin enu b'chayrai, so you can actually immerse yourself in the crevice of this enormous eye, if you will, because it's considered to be like natural and connected to the water. So, again, that can't be the case because it's even be'ain, it's fine as is, not just alidei taruvos mixed up. So therefore, Amar Papa, it's limute nasan sa v'natal sa, the famous din of nasan sa v'natal sa. What is that? Ditnan mikvah sheish bo mem sa mechuvanais. So for a mikvah to be kosher, it has to have 40 saw. Now, what if you have a mikvah which is mamish exactly 40 saw? So let's say you nice and saw, you put into it a saw which is not rainwater, right? As Rashi says, me perois b'chol mashke she'enu mayim v'temed mishihichmitz. Let's say you put in fruit juices or some type of liquid which is not water. Pamim malin, pamim enu malin. Ketzad. So look in Rashi. Mikvah sheish boy lametesayin. If it's only 39, which is not the minimum, v'nafal samihen l'taychai, and then a saw of meperos falls into it. So now it's 40. So lo ha'alahu. Perish lo hashlimasu. That will not complete it, because 39 is not enough, and now you add one more peros, even though technically it is 40 saw, but it has to be 40 saw proper rainwater, and therefore it will not be mashlamit. However, pamim demalin, sometimes it will work, as Rashi says. Hayu b'toicha arboim saw. Let's say the mikvah is 40 saw mechuvanis, which is exactly enough. So the mikvah is now stamped as a kosher mikvah. Nasan sam me'elul haminim. Let's say you added an extra saw. So now there's 41 saw, 40 of rainwater and 1 saw of meperos. V'natul saw acher hanasina. And after you did that, you took out another saw from it. So he's saying that mikvah is still kosher, has 40, even though you could say, well, you probably proportionally took out some of the meperos among that one saw. It doesn't matter. Says Rashi, the batlu hanach kamoi b'mikvah hashalim, because it's considered to be batul, that amount, because we already had a kosher mikvah. Hilkach ki chazer v'natal lo mifsal. That's the reason why if nasan, once you're nasan saw, you put in a saw of meperos, now it's 41, and then natal, so you took one out, it'll still be kosher. Now that's when we're dealing with a mikvah. Says Rashi, let's say you have a revius, let's say Rashi, Shim Hoisabo revius mayim, you have the minimum amount for netilas yadayim, and also mehem alo l'seichin roiv revius, you put in a quarter of something else, like again this meperos, then natal kenegdam, and then you then took out, once it was more than the revius, so you took out the extra amount. In that case, the Luchashiva Shir Zutra du Revius Levatlenu. So that's the distinction. When it comes to a mikvah, is also when it comes to the kior, which requires enough for 4 people. So if there was enough for 4 people, and then you added meperos to it, and then you took out a saw, it would be good. Not when it comes to netilas yadayim, though. So that is the distinction. Question 14. Mahu hamashlim l'mein mikvah v'enu mashlim revius mayim netilas yadayim. So nisan saw medavarim shein malinas and mikvah. The natal saw kosher ad rubo l'mikvah. You can do this all the way up until half. V'lol revius netilas yadayim. But does not work when it comes to netilas yadayim. That will not work. Okay. All right, let's keep going. So for Omer Rabbi Yehuda bar Shilo, Omer Rav Asi, Omer Rav Yochanan, ad ruba, as I said, it's got to be, you can do this up until the rov. You can't add 40 meperos and then remove, almost all of the water, etc. You could do this ad rubo until half of it. It says Rashi, im irbo maminan halalu ad rubo shel mikvah v'lo rubo b'chlal in the sinas tilas kosher. Okay. Amra Papa, im kadach bo revius. If let's say you made a hole in the mikvah, matbilan by machden v'sinorius. So you're able to be toivel these small pins into this area. Says Rashi, mazlagois, these like little forks, which are used for sewing and the like. So you could use that to be toivel. Says Rashi, v'afal pi shenis matu hamayim. When there's less water, then muravin b'mei mikveh, it didn't get mixed in. But also kadicha matbilin by machden. So basically, what it's saying is that if you have like a little hole in the mikvah, and you have like a cup which is revius, you can put the kalim in there. You don't actually put it in the mikvah. It's almost like through hashaka, but it's connected to the other waters, and therefore you can be toivel small things. Hoyel umachshira de mikvah asya. So because it's actually coming from the mikvah itself. And since it's attached to the mikvah, so therefore you could be toivel there. Omer Rabbi Yomi Omer Reish Lakish, May mikvah ksherin l'mei kiyor. So this is an interesting chiddush, that May mikvah is kosher for the May kiyor, which is interesting because the May kiyor we understood when we had when we did shikua, we had it submerged by the bore, so then it was connected to the ma'ayin, to the well, to the water, to the spring. So up until this point, we thought that the mikir, it was necessary for it to be from spring water. But we know that a mikvah is not necessarily spring water, it's megashamim that came from the sky, right? So remember, so we can see the loy mayim chayim ninhu, that you can wash your hands with the mekir, even if the mekir is not using living spring water, it's not required. So vasanya, so in Torah's Kohanim it says v'haker v'hakiraim yirchatz b'mayim. That's what it says. So we learn out from that you're supposed to wash the various parts with water. V'lo b'yayin, but you're not supposed to wash it with wine. And also says b'mayim v'lo b'mazoig, but it's not supposed to be diluted. What it says b'mayim is l'rab l'shar mayim. It's coming to include other types of water. Says Rashi, v'afil mechunsin, even if it's not necessarily mei geshamim, it's also, that water is also acceptable. Okay. Now on this, the kavachimer will make kior. So he's saying certainly when it comes to the make kior, my kavachimer will make kior. What does that mean? Lav the mayim chayim nehu, because this is mayim chayim, right? It says Rashi v'hachakamer kavachimer will mayim chayim haroyin l'kior, that's fit for the kior shiksherim v'rachitzas kirbi kadashim. That certainly you could use that to wash the various parts. So, but why? So what must be the kavachimer? So it's because the kavachimer is that this water is like even more special water because it's living spring water. So it goes to the kasha. How could we say that the May mikvah is kosher l'meikir? Which I thought we said it has to be living spring water. Lo, the kaddish. What does that mean? Says Rashi, umeikir mamish kayoav. Actually, he learns out from the meikir, bekavachimer sharei chitzimim of kerbayim, that you actually can wash with that water the innards. Bekavachimer shalhen de kadshehu. Okay, and the kavachimer is that it's kodesh. Okay, says the Gemara, the kadishi mel yasehi, the fact that it is in the kior, that it's kodesh, is that actually a good thing? But if you have water which does not have literally a nickname of sorts, as we continue to Chaf Beis Amud Beis, Yatsu, says Rashi, Yatsu, Yatsu Meikir Sheshalhim. So Yatsu, it's come to exclude Meikir Sheshalhim Shem Lavaya, a Meikir which has an extra name. Elolav Deruin Meikir. It's fit for Meikir. Almamayim Chaim Ninhu. So again, we see it has to be this natural spring water. So Tanoi, the fact is Machlokes Tanoim Diem Rabbi Yochanan Meikir Rabbi Shmuel Omer Mei Be'enhain. It has to be mamash like Mayim Chaim. Chlam Omrim Shar Me'emois Haim. It could be other waters. So we have this Machlokes TA2. Elu Mayim Ksherim L'Meikir L'Kuli Alma. Certainly it's Ma'ayin, right? Fresh water. And what is the Machlokes? What can you use for Meikir? So the Machlokes is B'mei Mikvah Shar Me'mois Plugta de Tanoi. So that is the Machlokes. Okay, let's look at, before we move on, let's look at question TB2, which is on the previous daf, which asks, Tit hanoirik, you have this mud, himashum revius ulmei mikvah. So, as we said, he said, If it's coming to exclude tit hanaruk hechidami, it depends. If the par can drink from it, it's not so thick than a fil or nami. If it cannot drink from it because it's so thick, then a fil mikvanami ein mashlim. Then it should not be able to work. So if it's very thin liquid, it shouldn't matter. But if it's very, very thick liquid that an animal would not be able to drink from it, so then that would constitute that it would not be mashlim. So I wrote im lach. I think I may have got the right answer. Zem mashlim benaisin sav neitel saw. Okay, I can scraw. It's not. I'm just drawing at straws here. Rak legabe me mikva. Barubo avlo mashlim uravius. This is all incorrect. So I got like the first couple words right. Im lach. So if it's liquid, so then that he can drink it. Afilu revius nami, right? So afilu revius nami, and I'll just write v'im av. If it's very thick, she'ein hapara yachol lishtot mimenu oz ein mashlim l'kol. So he said it can't be because there's no distinction when it comes to either by the tit hanayrik, either it is acceptable if it's a thinner liquid, but it's not acceptable if it's too thick of a liquid. Okay. All right, let's keep going. So it's TB2. Okay, good. All right, let's see the next piece. So, oral. What's this going back? This is going all the way back to the beginning of our parak, if I recall, which was a while back. Let's see if we can get to it. So our Mishnah told us that there are certain people that are not able to do the avoda, and if they do, that will cause it to be puzzle. So this is all the way back to Daf Tes Vav. A non-Kohen, an Onain, a Tvul Yoyim, a Chusar Kippur, a Chusar Begadim, if you didn't wash your hands and feet, which is why we got into this whole Indian about the Kior. And then the next one is an oral. Now Rashi on the Mishnah is careful to pick out that this is not someone who just decided not to have a bris milah, but it's a kohen shemesu achal machmas milah. His brothers have already died, and therefore it's obviously a genetic thing that he would die if he would end up doing this. So therefore, it's not like he did anything wrong. He's not like a mum or anything, but at the same time, he's still mitzias and oral. Okay, so Minol, how do we know that person will possibly vote? So Rav Chisda, Davar Zemeteris Moshe Rabbeinu Lomanu. We never learned it from there. However, Mediri Yecheskel ben Buzi Lomanu. We've had this in many places. The pasuk says, Kol Oymar Hashem Elokim. So Hashem said, Kol ben Nechar Arel, anyone who is an Arel that didn't have a bris milah, the Arel Basar lo yavo el mikdashi. He's not allowed to enter the base of Mikdash. V'chol ben Nechar asher b'taich b'nei Yisrael. So what do we see from this pasuk of Kol ben Nechar Arel Leiv Arel Basar lo yavo el mikdashi, which are saying to serve me. So you're not allowed to, you can't do the avoda. However, Manoan the machli avoda. How do you know taka that the avoda is going to be not good at all? T'chsiv, because the pasuk says, and this is also in Yecheskel, B'aviachem b'nei Nechar Areli Leiv Areli Basar. If let's say they do come in, they'll end up profaning my home, which is basically the answer right there. Is if they do the avoda, and then it says if they end up doing the avoda, like bringing the fats and the zrikas adam, the feru as brisi. They basically annulled my covenant el kol to avoy seichem, based on this abominable act. Anyway, so we see pretty clearly that you can't do the avoda as an oral, and if you do, then the avoda is not good. Tanoban ben nechar, when it says ben nechar yochol ben nechar mamish, you think it's just talking about someone who is a ben nechar mamish, namely someone who is not Jewish. Talmud lemer oral lave. So what does that mean, an oral lave? It's beyond. It's not talking about an akum. So im kain matam lemer ben nechar. What is that coming to tell you? It means nachru masav, that they're foreign to Hashem in their actions. Well, obviously, the ela oral lave oral basam. So this is like someone who's a mummer, right? You can't do the avoda. So also, if you didn't do a bris, Talmud Leimer oral basar, we need these psukim. Because Rachmana oral basar mishum demais. It's something which is repulsive, that this person didn't have a bris because he's an oral basar. Let's get this down clearly. Oral basar v'hu tzadik menayin. An oral basar could be a tzadik, right? But nonetheless, the problem is oral basar it's moist because he doesn't have a bris milah, even though he's a tzadik. Of oral lave the loy moist because he had his bris, but he's just not doing the right thing in mitzvahs. Emelo b'yashmin an oral lave mishum. It's because he is foreign to God. He's a tzaddik and everything. He just couldn't have a bris milah. So it does. That's why you have to have both. So because otherwise you would think, again, obviously someone doesn't have a bris because that's mois, but not necessarily would you say that the person who's an oral lave, he's not. He didn't do anything. He had bris milah. Or you could say fakert because this guy doesn't have any allegiance to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. And then we say Tameh Pasul. If you have a Kohen who is Tameh, so Amru Zikni Darim. So the Zikni Darim said, and let's just get to where we're at over here. Lo Shanu El Tami Sheretz. The only time we say it's a problem is if he's only tummy by sheretz. Although tummy mace, we're actually, ironically, or counterintuitively, we're actually more lenient by tummy mace than tumas sheretz. Why? We say that b'diavad it works by a yochid too. This kohen's avoid is okay as it sits as maratza, since it's a kula by tumas. By his tumas of tumas hutubit sibura. So basically, what we're saying over here is that when it comes to tumas mace, you can be tameh, but if let's say you're needed to do the avoda, so we say tumah hutubit sibura, that it's allowed. So when it comes to then that's davka by tumas mace. So therefore, we say the same thing over here, that it's only by. The whole issue is dafka when it comes to tumas sheretz, but not by if someone is tamei mace, because since tumah hutubit sibura, so therefore we're not going to have the same strength of din when it comes to someone who is tamei mace. Fine. So let's keep going. Ihaki tamei sheretz nami leis b'kavachaymer metami mace. So. If Tami Mace, which is so strict, nonetheless, Ma Tami Mace Shitayin Hazal Shlishi Vishmi Maratza. If Mamish requires they have to sit for 7 days and you need a third day and a seventh day that's sprinkled on by the Paraduma, nonetheless it's Maratza. So Tami Sheret She'enu Tayin Hazas Gimel Bishvi, it doesn't have all these laws. So Enu Din Shemaratza. Why do we say that only when it comes to Tumas Mesas and Maratza, you should learn a Kabbalah that it should certainly be the same thing when it comes to Tumas Sheretz. So Ksavri Zikni Darum Mechaprin Kimischaprin. So what does that mean? Ma Mischaprin Tami Mes in Tami Sheretz Loi, Af Mechaprin Tami Mace in Tami Sheretz Loi. So that's basically how he explains, as Rashi says, Kishahutra Tuma B'tzibor. When did we say that when it comes to the B'tzibor we're lenient? When there's Tuma. Shneim Hayu B'mashma, HaKayin V'tzibor, both. Hilkach, Kayin K'tzibor. Ma Kishahutra Tuma Eitzel Rav Tzibor. When we're lenient when it comes to Tuma Hutra B'tzibor, the majority of the people are Tameh, so you can do the Avoda even while Tameh. Shenitmu Tameh Mace, that's only by Tumas Mace. V'lo Tameh Sheretz. V'av Kishahuter L'kayin B'karbon Tzibor Mace Huter V'lo Sheretz. So it's not the Sheretz, therefore that should not be included. Okay. So Mike Savri. Ik Savri in Sheikhn Mizarkin al Tameh Sheretz. So what is this referring to? This is referring to the carbon Pesach. Rashi says, Al Yochid Tami Sheretz. If an individual who has Toma Sheretz, and now it's Pesach time. So is he allowed to go, are you allowed to shecht for him? Says Rashi, V'afal Gab di Yochel Litba V'lechel Le'erev. The question is, maybe you should be able to shecht and do all the avoda, even though right now he can't eat it, but Karm Pesach's not until tonight anyway. By the time tonight comes, he'll be fine. So the question is, will we shecht and have in mind someone who has Tumas Sheretz? So if you hold that you will not do so, that in Sheikh Nevizarkanal Tameh Sheretz, and therefore you can't shecht the carbon Pesach for someone who's Tameh Sheretz, Mailu Avdi Tzibor Betuma, why don't we say that you have the Tzibor's Tameh, a Tumas Tzibor, with Tumas Sheretz. Hakol should be Yachid Ninchat Tzibor Avdi Tuma. However, when it comes to a Yachid, he would be pushed off to Pesach Sheni. The Tzibor, if the majority was Tameh, they would end up doing the carbon Pesach on the first day, on the first Pesach. Al Ksavi Shech V'Zarkin Al Tameh Sheretz. It must be that you don't need to override it, because you are allowed to shecht al Tameh Sheretz. Or Ma'ula. Takul Reish Lakish L'Draima V'Chiyeh is a Kayach Maruba. Which one's a stronger Kayach? Kayach Mechaprin, which is the Kayin, or Kayach Mischaprin, the Tzibor. So Avi Yomer Kayach Mischaprin. I would say that the Tzibor's Kayach is strong. Uma b'makom shenitmu ba'alim b'sheretz. So when a person becomes Tumas Sheretz, mishalchin karbonosehen, we would he can send out his carbon on the 14th of Nisan. So kayin shenitmu b'sheretz eino maratze. So when it comes to a kayin who is Tumas Sheretz, he cannot bring it because they are mechalel the avoda. So makom shenitmu ba'alim b'meis she'ein mishalchin karbonosehen, because they have to wait until Pesach Sheni. Kayin shenitmu b'meis eno din she'ein maratze, certainly should not. So Ksavers Dikni Dorim Tami Mace Nami Mishalech Karbonoisav, that this is considered to be B'diavad by the Carbon Pesach, even though you cannot eat the Pesach. Vaksiv, as the pasuk says, okay, Shani Mashalchin Karbonoisav Kivan Shenitmu B'Mace Enu Din Shin Maratzu. So Ksavers Dikni Dorim Tami Mace Nami Mishal Karbonoisav. Even if you're Tami Mace, you could still bring the carbon, not just by Tumas Sheretz. So it says a person who's Tameh, you bring it on the second month. That's only la mitzvah, okay? But however, that's initially. But otherwise, it doesn't have to be that way. Ish lefi achloi, which is mashma, you have to eat it, is la mitzvah, because you can even be tameh as long as the shechita was done properly, with you in mind. The echilas karm pesach is actually nama akev. Lakuve loy, is it true? It's nama akev. Mosandia b'mechsas nefashos, according to their number. Malamed she'ena pesach nishchat elamin niyuyav. It has to be a count. Shachtu shalom nuyav. If you did it without the count, yochli he ki oiver al hamitzvah. It's like you violated. Do you think that? Talmud Leimer Tachusu Harabais Hakasuv Shanu of la'akev. It's coming to tell you that it is ma'akev. V'yiske shachilu minuyav. So apparently it is ma'akev, him not eating it. No, zikni darum lo makshi. The zikni darum actually do not agree with that. The chilu makshi nami, even if they don't agree, mehad nami isluhu pircha. They can ask a question. When it comes to a person who becomes Thomas Sheretz, Mishalchin Kamanusein Lachatchila, that you can send the karbanos. Kayin Shenitma B'Sheretz, once he became Tommy Sheretz, Ein Maratza, in the avoda. So let's just see another couple of lines. Makam Shenitma B'Balam B'Meis, Shein Mishalchin Kamanusein Lachatchila. Kayin Shenitma B'Meis, Enudin Shein Maratza. Okay, we're gonna stop there. Maybe see another question or two. Okay. Question TA3. Elu shnei chidushim chidshu ziknei darom inyan tamei meis b'karben. Okay, so one big chiddush was a kohen tamei meis is maratza, and also the balim which of tamei meis, it's not ma'akev the carbon pesach bidi eved, which is the same question as TB3. Let's see if I got it right. Koyin shu oisa voida batumas meis carbon maratza le'inin carbon pesach atami yotza afal pi shehu loy oichel mimenu achilu lo ma'akva. Sounds right. I've got it.